In the late 1950s and early 60s, a new movement seized the imagery of mass-produced popular culture and turned it into art. And according to received wisdom, women in pop art usually appear like objects, and the artists who painted them were men. But the reality was very different. Pop art wasn't an all-boys club. From the beginning, female artists pioneered a vision of consumer culture that was as brilliant and surprising as that of their male counterparts. These artists captured the spirit of the changing world. You've got silhouettes everywhere.
Yeah, she was doing Mad Men before Mad Men, wasn't she?
They revolutionised what a woman could be.
I was not expecting this at all.
And transformed what we thought of as art.
He said, you should cast it in bronze. I said, I'd cast it in cloth.
So why haven't we heard of them?
I didn't know them, and I'm a pop artist.
Consciously or not, for decades, critics, curators, gallery owners and dealers have been telling an inaccurate, one-sided, even chauvinistic tale. Some of the most important pop artists were written out of history. The women. Women pop artists didn't make many history books, but if you know where to look, they were there. These are some of the female artists of pop. They're all extraordinarily glamorous, but they dealt with much more than just beauty. In the 60s, when pop as a movement was starting to form, these women were very important artists. They were being shown in galleries, they were being reviewed. Other artists, their male contemporaries, would have seen their work, possibly even been influenced by it. But now, they've dropped out of art history a little bit. Their lives aren't documented in the same sort of detail as those of their male contemporaries. Jan Harworth, Idel Weber, Rosalind Drexler, Marisol, and perhaps the most intriguing one of them all, at least for a British audience, is this lady, Pauline Boty. In 1962, a landmark BBC documentary put pop art on the map. Ken Russell's film Pop Goes the Easel unleashed a group of young firebrands, the most radical and exciting artists Britain had seen for a generation. One of them was Pauline Boty.
What's that? That's crazy.
That's just an occasional spaceship flying through the sky, you know. You get them every now and again.
Pauline Boty embodied the spirit of pop.
She engaged in it and encouraged everyone else. She was an instigator and an enabler, if you like. Definitely.
Boty and her pop contemporaries celebrated the end of post-war gloom and embraced a new mood of optimism, inclusion and social change. Daring libertarians, the group exploded ideas about what art and artists should be. And the establishment was horrified.
The world of film stars, the twist, science fiction, pop singers, a world which you can dismiss if you feel so inclined, of course, as being tawdry and second-rate, but a world all the same, in which everybody, to some degree anyway, lives, whether we like it or not.
It was the cultural program. It was Monitor. People were thinking they'd get ballet, opera, you know, not all this rubbish pop art. And people wrote in saying that they were going to cancel they weren't going to pay their subscription to the BBC.
For Boty, art had the power not only to tear down the establishment, but also to transform society. As the 60s began, a woman's fate was still marriage, motherhood, and domesticity. And it was a future that Boty refused to accept.
I insist that everybody twist.
A decade before mainstream feminism, Pauline Boty had a mission: to challenge a sexist society and its confining gender stereotypes.
Round and round and you lift your legs, up and down and you twist around the
revolution is on the way, and all over the country young girls are sprouting, shouting and shaking. And if they terrify you, they mean to. And they're beginning to impress the world.
Pauline Beatty set out to reinvent the kind of woman one could be. And I think that's really significant. She was trying to change the rules. A lot of the women pop artists were very good looking, and they were so trapped by how they looked. They were never allowed to escape from being beautiful young women. So they used pop to explore it.
In Bote's early paintings, women are often glamorous, beautiful, sexually alluring. But there's something else too. Fantasies dreamt up by Hollywood and the media.
I wanna be loved by you, just you, nobody else but you.
Pauline Beatty very much identified with Marilyn Monroe, this kind of highly sexual yet vulnerable and interesting woman. It's not that kind of cool, detached image that you get in the screen prints of Warhol. It's this empathetic, involved position of the fan.
So you feel this is almost articulating that emotional, psychological thing that happens when a fan looks at an icon,
Yes.
and there it is, a black and white dead image, but you bring something to it and create something that feels much more alive.
Exactly, and I think that's what Pauline Beatty captures in the way that she uses paint, whilst also referencing black and white PR imagery.
Marilyn's death in 1962 devastated Bote, inspiring her elegy, Colour Her Gone. She believed that Marilyn had been betrayed by men who were unable to see her intelligence through her dazzling sex appeal. Bote was determined to be taken seriously, while also revelling in her glamour and simply having fun.
On the good ship, lollipop.
In 1962, Bote started auditioning for films and performing in plays, all the while continuing to paint.
Hello.
Hello, Natalie. I'm Alistair. It's a beautiful old house.
Natalie Gibson met Bote in her first week at the Royal College of Art, and they became close friends immediately. She witnessed Bote trying to make it as starlet and artist.
That's a very glamorous picture. This looks like a proper press
I think
photograph.
it is.
I mean, looking at these, she seems like somebody who was blessed with a great deal of charisma.
Absolutely. She's such a vivacious girl. I mean, there wasn't anything she couldn't do, really. I mean, she was just a kind of force. Well, this was something where people were choosing their ideal girl, and David Frost chose Pauline.
I like women who can do things, said David as we queued for tea in the BBC canteen. You know, a really swinging bird. It's important she should look sexy, but she must have the other thing as well. She must look as if she could become Minister of Pensions.
I think he thought she had an intellect, or, you know, she was clever and well-read and bright, as well as being sexy.
Bote was determined to change the status quo, and to her, sexual liberation was the key.
Poor retiring English females so unsure of their sexuality, their femininity. Your men are the ones who talk, who act, who do. You're only their wives, a nondescript appendage, a second-class citizen.
For Pauline Bote, women would only be equals when they could express their sexuality as freely as men. And she thought that time was fast approaching. The TV show Ready Steady Go defined a generation with its catchy theme tune. Bote danced in its studio, and for her the show seemed to symbolise the sexual possibility and freedom of the times.
This painting is about the pleasures of dancing to pop music for women, but also sexual anticipation And the rose was very much Pauline's iconography for female sexual desire and sensuality.
Today,
and I'm wearing one in honour of her today. But when we look more closely, it's overpainted with flesh tones. It's wild and hair-like, and perhaps these are legs each side. It is very suggestive of female genitalia. Something's about the lived, embodied experience of sexual arousal for a woman.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
A sexual libertarian, a feminist ahead of her time. So why on earth did Boaty portray herself like this?
I mean, in this case, she's completely starkers.
She always posed with her paintings. When most of the women at that time posed with their work, they would be in black clothes, black slacks, black top, very androgynous. They hid the fact that they were women. And what Pauline wanted to do was to absolutely smash that open, saying, no, I'm a sexually proactive being, just like men. And if I am naked with my painting, there is no way you can avoid the fact this is a woman. And it was a really transgressive and brave thing to do, but it didn't work.
Boaty began to lose control of her image. She appeared in her underwear without her paintings at all, in publications like Titbits, a notorious soft porn mag.
The art director at Titbits sliced off the paintings so that all you got left is the pretty girl for the delectation of the Titbits male audience.
So you're saying she never sanctioned her photographs appearing in a magazine like this?
No.
But it was too late. Boaty's image as a sexy, scantily clad starlet began to overshadow her reputation as an artist. She vented her frustrations in this painting of cult writer Derek Marlowe, a heartthrob equally celebrated for his brains.
It's a very seductive, attractive portrayal. This is an individuated man, as he's carefully painted photorealist. And then above are the unknown ladies. They're unknown, they're trying to be known, they all look the same, they've got the same makeup, they're straining for visibility within what is possible in that world at the time.
These seem to me to be an expression of despair at having to present yourself in a certain way that we see around here in the 60s in the media. And it's a way that, if you're a man, she's saying, you can get away with it.
Yeah. And I think that's what depressed her. In the last couple of years of her life, she got very depressed, actually. And she found it very difficult to be heard and seen as an artist.
In 1965, Boaty's luck seemed to change. She was overjoyed when she fell pregnant. But a routine X-ray revealed devastating news. She had cancer. To protect her unborn child, she refused the treatment that could have saved her life.
She told me she thought it would take about 10 years off her life.
So
But that she'd be better, you know. She'd get out of there. The last time I went to see her, I dragged Peter Blake along because he hadn't seen her. And it was too late.
Boaty died on the 1st of July 1966, leaving behind a 5-month-old baby. She was 28.
As soon as Pauline died, her work disappeared. Because she had a 3-year life of making pop paintings, basically. And after that, the work totally disappeared.
She was this troubling memory of something extraordinary in the back of my mind.
In 1993, art historian David Miller was planning an exhibition of British pop art. He had a hunch that Boaty's paintings were worth including.
If these things existed, where the hell had they gone to? Nobody knew.
But somebody did know. Not in the heart of London's art scene, but in a farm in Kent. Bridget Boaty was married to Pauline's brother, a farmer.
They didn't come to light until the day that we were clearing out the house And I said to Arthur, we can't put those paintings in the tip.
Well, Arthur, your husband, wanted to just throw away his sister's...
No, it was a question of finding a space for them, wasn't it? And so we slung it into the horse box and just slung it into the mess room. When we got back, it was the only dry place we could find. And that's where it stayed.
A chance tip-off led David Mellor to the Boaties farm.
So it wasn't here.
He was determined to recover the works and have them seen by the public.
So, you're telling me that this is the place?
Yes. In 1992, I came here with Pauline's daughter. With
What, here to the loo, David?
To the loo. It wasn't a loo then. And
looking here now, you know, there's a plastic sack of potatoes.
Yeah.
There's loads of bits and pieces. And the thing I find extraordinary is it's almost like if you're looking for an image of women artists from the 60s being ignored, we're standing within it.
it could have been a lot of firewood stacked up. But it wasn't. It was this thing that was of massive cultural importance, because suddenly a kind of whole history of English pop was different.
She's not the only woman pop artist to be marginalised from the story of pop. There were a wide range of women who did make names for themselves at the time, but have been variously marginalised or excluded. I mean, a low watermark was achieved in 1991 when the Royal Academy of Art had a huge retrospective of pop, where 1 out of 202 pop works was by a woman.
If British pop art has a hierarchy, then this man is at the top. Sir Peter Blake. In 1967, one of his most famous images would rebrand a mop-top boy band into a group of serious artists, the Beatles. The Sgt. Pepper album cover, a compendium of the Beatles' cultural heroes, was a crucial part of the concept.
Peter Blake went on to find fame as one of the founding fathers of pop art, but he didn't work alone. And actually, the Sgt. Pepper record cover is a collaboration. And today, the other artist who created this is practically unknown.
Until their divorce in 1981, Jan Harworth was one half of a pop art power couple, along with Peter Blake. To find her, I've flown 5,000 miles to the mountains of Provo, Utah, where Harworth now lives.
This is the most magical house I've ever seen. The eye is drawn somewhat to the enormous moose head above your fireplace. I have a vision of you on the top of the mountain with a gun, killing this big creature.
No, you might have a vision of me painting it blue.
And of course, I can't help noticing this. This is what many people don't know
Not me before.
but should. Staged by Peter Blake and Jan Harworth.
Yeah.
So there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Not quite black and white, black and red.
This may look like a collage, but really, it's a photo. The figures were huge. Life-size cutouts, dummies and sculptures, creating an enormous 3D film set. Even the lettering was made of real flowers. The Beatles just posed in the middle.
The thing about this is that it's got quite a contentious authorship history,
Yeah, it does.
really. To set the record straight from your point of view, which bits of this did you create?
Well, the concept of the set comes straight out of what I was doing at the time. I was doing tableaus. That overarching concept of making it life-size, and the lettering is mine. The crowd concept is very much Peter.
Sgt. Pepper only earned them 200 quid, but it did win them a Grammy. It's now a little worse for wear.
Yeah, what has happened? This is...
Children have happened.
Oh, but...
They used it in their little Wendy house outside, and that's the dog chewed that.
And this once upon a time was a gramophone horn
Yeah.
up here, was it?
Yes.
So this is a kind of metaphor, really, for your outlook.
Absolutely.
It's a 2 fingers up at a certain system.
Well, it's like a piece of iconoclastic art.
Yeah. Bash it up, put it in an old bag, leave it out in the rain. It's wonderful.
In 1962, Harworth arrived at the Slade School of Fine Art in London. She didn't exactly receive a warm welcome.
I said to one of the tutors, "Do you need to see a portfolio of my work?" And he said, "Oh, well, no, we don't really need to see portfolios of the women students. We just need to see their photograph because they're here to keep the boys happy."
No way.
I promise you. Not a word of a lie. At the Slade, for sure, there was this kind of separation that somehow the male students knew about paint. And they would do this. They would say, well, men just know about paint, you know. Women don't.
Harworth did know about something. She'd been sewing since she was 8.
We're going to make a donut.
What sort of a donut is this going to be?
This is a superhero donut.
A skill so historically tied to women wasn't thought of as art.
I don't quite understand how it can go inside out.
There you
So
go.
now we stuff it, do we?
Yeah, we do. Here's
I'm a
those.
donut natural. Is that what you're saying?
She knew that in this field at least, she could outdo the men.
I don't get what you're doing at all.
So you pull there.
So you just pull out like this?
Yeah.
All the way?
Yeah.
Pull it tight?
Pull it tight.
This is harder than it looks.
Harworth had her breakthrough on the bus.
There were tulips for sale, and I so wanted to have them. And I thought, cloth, I could make them out of cloth. And then it was just bang, because you thought, okay, gloves, that's a flower. And okay, zips, that's a snapdragon. It just was like a damn burst of dreams, because it was something that I really understood, and I knew the male students didn't.
There was a shift going on in British sculpture, and she's part of that. And I think she kind of gets neglected out of that story. I think the history of sculpture in general, she's one of the originators of doing soft sculpture. So I think that's really significant.
Traditional sculpture was cold, rigid, and on a plinth. Harworth sculpture was warm, yielding, and homely. It was a mischievous challenge to a time-honoured way of making art. At the Slade, where Harworth was taught by some of the biggest names in modern art, it caused a stir. One of her tutors was Edoardo Paolozzi.
When I showed Palazzi, he said, you should cast it in bronze. And I had the presence of mind to say to him, I've cast it in cloth.
Harworth's big break came in 1963, when her work was showcased at the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London. She's recreated part of that exhibition here, in the Brigham Young University Museum in Provo.
I love this guy. It's so great. He's like your sort of rather gruff guard dog.
Would you like to adjust his tongue?
Can I touch his tongue?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that...
Look, the tongue comes out.
Indeed, the tongue does come out.
Cloth doesn't last. It's fragile. It degrades. It was the perfect symbol for human frailty.
That whole interest in the body and how the body is soft and sags and responds to gravity. It's more like what the potential of those materials can do. That's why soft sculpture is important.
The idea really was that older people are sort of trapped in a chair or immobile. The old become a piece of furniture, perhaps. I was trying to make the idea of wrinkles be not an awful thing, but something that was sort of full of color and livelihood and memory.
With her stitch grannies and cloth objects, Harworth had discovered a new direction for sculpture. We can still see her influence today.
With Tracy Emin, you have sewing. Sarah Lucas, her body parts that are sewn together with stockings and things like that. There's a generation that takes the sewing and incorporates it into fine art. And that's why Jan's important. She's the beginning of that still has lineage.
Yet unbeknown to Harworth, on the other side of the Atlantic, another artist was starting to make soft sculptures of his own. Klaus Oldenburg got his wife to sew the giant hamburgers that helped elevate him to the pop art pantheon. Today it's Oldenburg, not Haworth, who's known as the pioneer of soft sculpture. This wasn't always the case. From the mid-60s, Haworth's work received international acclaim. It caught the eye of Robert Fraser, swinging London's most important art dealer.
It was only Bridget Riley and I and Yoko Ono who were part of the gallery as females, but that wasn't a bad company to be in.
It's fantastic company. I mean, you were having a great moment in the 60s.
Yeah.
But Haworth's moment didn't last.
Happy birthday, dear Peter.
In the 1970s, she moved to the country to raise a family. Away from the London art scene, Blake's reputation continued to grow, but Haworth's began to fade.
I felt I could do it all. I felt I could be an artist, take care of my daughter, and do all the cooking and shopping and cleaning, all of that stuff. And I was willing to take that position at that time. I mean, now I think I was exceptionally stupid in that regard and made an exceptionally good decision in terms of my children. You know, the making of a mind is, it surpasses the making of an art object. People are more important than art.
Pop art might have started in Britain, but it took off in America. At the start of the 60s, there was no place on earth more dazzling than New York City.
I think there's something really thrilling about approaching New York like this, because you see the city erupting out of the water like this great gleaming metropolis of the future, and it helps to give you a sense of, or me anyway, how excited the pop artists of the 60s must have been just by capitalism generally. They wanted to incorporate the everyday reality they found in the city into their art.
For millions of Americans, the shiny reality of advertising belied the drudgery of office work and commuting. And this was the world explored in the paintings of this woman, Idel Weber.
Hi. Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Shall I open this up?
Good idea.
Really good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Lovely this.
It's pretty cool having an elevator that goes straight into your
If
apartment.
it works.
It's right.
That thing does
Convenient
not.
if it does.
Yeah, it does noise. We're gonna have to have a new one.
Mad Men.
Yeah, Mad Men. Right.
Do you yourself see similarities between your paintings and the Mad Men
Oh,
title
no
sequence?
question. No question.
How do you feel?
What am I gonna do? You know, scream, sue them?
Mad Men's stark, stylish silhouettes won the show an Emmy in 2008. Idel Weber pioneered the look 50 years earlier. It all began in 1956 with her first visit to New York City. Aged 24, Weber was being featured in an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art. This is your first exhibition?
Yeah.
It must have been validation for you as a young artist.
Oh my God, I was thrilled.
She didn't go to the opening alone. So this is you and Julian?
Yeah. He was very impressed by the fact that I was in the Museum of Modern Art. I said that's what he married me for, fame and fortune.
And this was your future husband?
Yeah. I knew almost immediately. I mean, I walked up the steps to that place and I just went, oh my God. It was really something. I mean, I just thought, I've never met anyone like this, ever. The night before I went, he said, hey, let's go back and get married. And I made it 2 seconds and I said, sure.
Through her marriage, Weber would see a world that transformed the way she made art.
I also like to do
So this is your working space?
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
your studio?
Yeah.
God, look, so this is a reproduction of the Munchkins you did. And you've got
That's
silhouettes everywhere.
Yeah.
This looks like Prince Charles.
Well, it does a little bit, doesn't it? This actually is my husband. I took a picture of him and he posed.
He was very dapper.
He was.
corporate lawyer, Julian worked amid the gleaming new architecture of Manhattan. Weber would meet him after work. The glass-fronted skyscrapers captured her imagination, and what she saw inside them would become her subject. Through the windows of the Lever Building, Weber saw the silhouettes of workers who, like her husband, toiled late into the night. There's such a big element of repetition. And, like, if you look up here, this is like it's the same guy.
That is, it is.
I mean, are you sort of saying that there's something supremely boring about corporate life?
Well, I think there was. Whether it was in an office building or it was on the farm, or it was, there's those routine things that happen and you know about them, but not everyone stops to see that or realizes it.
It also feels, if there's a kind of bigger message here, right?
Yeah.
Maybe what strikes me is that this is about society as this big, quite oppressive machine, like this grid system, stamping itself on people and turning them into these kind of stereotypes. Few were more stereotyped than the women. In Weber's vision, they're squeezed into corners. Weber simply painted what she saw. Looking around your work, it looks like women had various roles. They could be secretaries, they could be naked, they could be brides. But Weber was determined to become a painter. In the first years of her career, she came across another young artist. His name was Andy Warhol.
I thought it was very sweet. He's a crazy guy, but he was terrific. And I liked his work. I thought he really did some interesting stuff. Although I was in a contest with him, drawing contest, and I got second place. Warhol got first place.
That must have been annoying.
Well, it was.
As young artists, Weber and Warhol were desperate for a break. Finding a gallery was essential.
I had my portfolio and I went to various galleries hoping they would show some of the work. And I went to Stable Gallery, which was a wonderful gallery at the time. And the woman that ran it was quite intelligent, I think.
This is Eleanor Ward.
Yeah. And she popped up, "We don't show women."
Did she explain her reason when she said that? She just said, "We don't show women," that was it?
Yeah. And the worst part of all is with every rejection in that way, I didn't argue. When it comes to acquiring, they will always take the male picture, even if it was exactly the same, because you don't get as much for female stuff, and it just didn't have the cachet that the men's stuff had.
Sure enough, a couple of months later, the Stable Gallery gave a young male artist his first break. Weber's rival, Andy Warhol. When Weber made her best-known work, Munchkins, Warhol popped in to see it.
And he's looking at it, he's looking at it, he's looking at it, and he said, "You know, Idell, they're rollers. You know these new rollers that are out?" He said, "All you have to do is cut squares in them, and you can go really fast." And, I was doing them one by one by one. And he said, "Isn't that a good idea?" He said, "That would make it look the same." And I said, "No." He said, "Well, what's the problem?" I said, "Nuance, Andy, nuance," because those squares were all done by hand. But he was so funny, he was trying to help me.
Girls were made to take care of boys.
It's hard to know if the male artist truly saw the women as equals. Lichtenstein's most famous paintings were inspired by comic books, and they satirized rigid gender stereotypes. At least, I hope they do, because at face value, his feeble women could seem rather misogynistic. I'm heading to meet somebody that I hope is really going to shed some light on the whole pop scene, because back in the 60s she was an artist in her own right. The thing is, nobody really remembers that now. Instead, she's kind of known as a consort to one of pop art's big five, because for several years she was the girlfriend of Roy Lichtenstein. Today, Letty Lou Eisenhower is a student counsellor at a college in New York City. In the 60s, she lived with Lichtenstein during the crucial period when he shot to fame.
I brought you something.
Did you?
Yes, I thought you would like this.
Ah, comics!
These are some of the ones that he cut up.
These are seriously, these are the sources. Yes, Men of War. He did a whole series based on Men of War, All American Men of War.
But there are ones where you can see that he's cut out pictures. Yeah, there, he cut out whatever that fame was.
I didn't realise that he would use one comic so intensively.
Oh, he liked certain comics. That was, very clear that there were certain ones that he was much more attached to.
During their relationship, Eisenhower witnessed the pop movement taking flight. Although an artist herself, she wasn't considered an equal.
There was a bar that the artists all went to from the pop period, and I remember once Klaus and Tom Wesselman and a whole group of male artists standing in a little tight-knit group chatting and talking about art. And I remember feeling like this little kid running around the outside going, "Hey, pay attention. Woo! Hey, I'm here too. Woo, woo." Women, we were there, but we were there either as helpers or maybe as objects.
Eisenhower became known as a performance artist and regularly staged experimental happenings, sometimes without her clothes.
Who is this?
That's me.
Is it you? Amazing. What the hell's going on? You're covered in cream.
With cream, and then of course the piece was called Lick. It's the obvious.
What, and then people did genuinely come and lick the cream off?
Well, nobody had the guts to get up and come lick me. So,
really?
No.
Whether people licked her or not, Roy Lichtenstein hated his girlfriend's new performances, but Eisenhower had a plan to keep him happy.
That's so weird. I have to say, this feels so surreal. I was not expecting this at all.
This was to accommodate Roy, who didn't want me to go out and be naked anymore in public.
What, so he accepted this?
This?
Because this is totally, above, this is respectable.
Right. I mean, it's ridiculous.
He may have been a prude, but Lichtenstein did encourage Eisenhower's pop paintings. Today, they've all been lost, and this is one of the few press clippings she owns. Her painting isn't even in the foreground.
Why did you stop making work like that?
I guess because I didn't get very much response to it. And probably that was the case for most women. I think that the art world has traditionally been a male world. I would want to take a survey of all of the gallery owners, and find out who are they showing? What were they showing at this period of time?
In 1960, the clique of dealers and art critics that ruled the New York art market was joined by a new gallery, Pace. Unusually, in its 1964 pop art show, the International Girly Exhibit, almost half of the works were by women. One of them was Rosalind Drexler, who today is best known as a writer. She had no hair below the roundness of her stomach. It's an intriguing line. Submissions of a Female Wrestler is a riveting read.
The thing I find amazing about this book isn't so much that Rosalind Drexler wrote it, it's that she based it on first-hand experience, because in the early 50s she toured the country as a wrestler herself, professionally. She was known as Rosa Carla, the Mexican Spitfire.
The 1950s saw a wrestling boom, with flocks of women trying their luck in the ring. Rosalind Drexler was one of them, a young housewife who in 1950 left her husband and daughter for 3 months on the road. Life as a wrestler took her south.
Families, children, mothers, fathers, grandparents, they all loved it because it was good against evil. It was a basic story.
Did you enjoy it?
No, I hated it.
away from New York, Drexler encountered a different side of America, one that was brutal and racist.
There was a world apart from anything I had known. Big card, the advertisement card. On the card it said special section for colored folk. I said, special section, you know. And then the water fountains, white only. The toilets, white only. I mean, I said, what is this? What is happening? I didn't want to be here. And I left.
Drexler returned to her family, but the ghosts of what she'd seen stayed with her. By the mid-60s, her dark insights into America would produce some of the most unsettling paintings in pop. What's so surprising is that she never went to art school.
I never learned to draw or paint any of that stuff. I had to find a way to do what I wanted to do. And that's why I turned to the media using photographs and posters.
Drexler took the photographs and posters and painted directly on top of them. What started as necessity evolved into a distinctive style all her own.
You're burying the image. It's like the undead. My work, I suppose, just got an idea. My work's like the undead. It's buried.
Drawing upon the torrent of commercial imagery, Drexler created her own vision of the world, painting not media sensation, but psychological depth. This is a really creepy image involving Marilyn Monroe with some man skulking behind.
Yes, it's not a man skulking behind. It's her inner fear of being pursued by death.
Marilyn had obsessive-compulsive disorder and was terrified of dying. This photograph shows the aftermath of a fatal car crash on the estate of Arthur Miller. Marilyn became hysterical and started to run, her security guard in hot pursuit. You've seen something here which is much deeper and darker than perhaps most people would spot, because looking at her, she looks like she's trying to move away and she's moving quickly, but it doesn't look so apocalyptic.
But she was running because it's apocalyptic. Nobody else cares. They all think, oh, it's great, Marilyn's running.
The darkness Drexler saw in the media reflected the times. Civil unrest, violence, and political uncertainty. Drexler's painting, Is It True What They Say About Dixie, is named after a song about the beauty of the South.
Is it true what they say about Dixie? Does the sun really shine all the time? Do the sweet magnolias blossom at everybody's door? Do the folks keep eating possum till they can't eat no more?
The painting's title is ironic. It shows white supremacist Eugene Bull Connor, police chief of Birmingham, Alabama, who during the civil rights era became a symbol of racism.
He had a very bad reputation, evil man, and was responsible for a lot of deaths and attacks on black people. Very hateful human being.
The thing I love about this is that the mob has become this unified mass because the black is linking everything.
Yes.
So it's like this creature with all these different limbs, and it's very intimidating.
Yes, it is intimidating. Just their being there is intimidating.
Drexler's paintings were included in important early pop art shows. In the 1964 exhibition here at Pace Gallery, she held her own with the men. This is a list of some of the artists who exhibited there. You've got people like Lichtenstein, right?
Yes.
Big names. Tom Wesselmann.
Right.
Andy Warhol. These are the big male artists. And then Rosalind Drexler, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. The men in the show would soon become central figures in the emerging pop art canon. But Drexler was excluded. I wanted to ask you about how you felt at the time when this was happening.
You're asking me to understand what I felt 50 years ago?
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Who the hell knows? I can't go back and say, put me in the hierarchy. Too late now.
According to critics and curators, Drexler's paintings were too passionate, too painterly to be pop. By the late 60s, a strict set of rules was in place that defined what was pop art and what was not.
I think it came from the galleries and the critics in tandem. I think that they're trying to define a style in order to kind of get leverage, in order to promote it into the marketplace.
Artists like Warhol and Lichtenstein wanted to create art so flat and detached that it could have been made not by a hand, but by a machine.
Warhol gets that image and then makes a silkscreen and then replicates that silkscreen. There's 5 stages away from Marilyn. And that removal process is a chilling process. It's not expressionistic. It's analytic. And they're trying to remove that hand and try to remove the emotion. Okay, so that defines pop art a certain way.
Full of visible brushstrokes, Drexler's works are too obviously hand-painted to count as pure pop. For other female artists, it was a similar story.
They don't fit neatly and tightly into a circumscribed definition of the movement. And when that happens, and critics and curators can't neatly place them in those categories, they'd just rather not deal with them.
Drexler's recent paintings are held in storage. This is the first time she's seen her later works on the walls of a gallery.
You said before you were looking at the 60s work and you felt really proud. How do you feel when you look at these paintings?
Well, I'm so glad I did them. I'm very happy. You know, I feel that they're successful, or I would have destroyed them.
I think there's a link between your work and then that sort of darker side of Warhol. There's a whole strand of pop which is scathing, critical, strong, quite stern about the world that those artists see around them. And I feel that your work fits into that.
Thank you. Thank you.
To be honest,
Yes.
I'm just really thrilled to have met you today and to have seen the paintings in this situation, in this gallery, like a private view. It's been really special for me, so thank you.
Very much. Then I shouldn't go home and kill myself.
Please don't. It's quite easy to find pop art slightly inane sometimes, maybe a bit flat, a bit superficial, but her art isn't superficial at all because she's looking at America, she's finding fault with it, there's a moral centre to it which is compelling because it feels authentic and real. I was really quite in awe of her by the end, actually. I felt like I'd met someone who was wise, a really great artist.
Work by female pop artists hasn't been easy to find. At New York's Museum of Modern Art, there's a notable exception. The artist known as Marisol was famed for her exotic beauty and sophistication. Born in Paris to Venezuelan parents, she arrived in New York City in 1950. 6 years later, when she was still only 25, Marisol's early sculptures were shown here alongside work by Picasso, Duchamp, Johns and Rauschenberg. In 1963, she was back in MoMA's first major pop art show. Then, her work filled an entire room. Today, MoMA owns 28 of her works, but only 2 are on display. I'm quite excited because I've never actually seen any works works by Marisol for real. This is the first time I've seen one of her sculptures, and this is a piece from 1962 called Love, and it's a Coke bottle being shoved into a plaster cast of a woman's face, Marisol's own. And it's quite a brutal piece, really. Marisol's making a joke about the fact that this consumerist culture, this capitalist abundance, is being literally, in this case, shoved down our throats. It's a piece of satire, and it works effectively because it's both disturbing, but also, weirdly, and don't judge me for saying this, but slightly amusing. Marisol is on show in the permanent collection, sharing the space with pop art's chosen few. But she's hardly the main attraction. Everybody, they've got their phones out, they're just interested in Marilyn, by that pesky Andy Warhol. I don't know, what's he got that she hasn't? In the 1960s, it was a different story. Marisol was the only female artist who could command the same kind of prices as the men. Her work was playful, witty. It satirized politicians, celebrities, and society. She made elaborate self-portraits and casts of her own face. And people were desperate to know about the woman behind the mask. But Marisol was determined to remain a mystery.
She's constantly referred to as an enigma. She's probably one of the hardest interviews I've ever done in my life. It was almost like pulling teeth to get her to talk.
Vous n'aimez pas du tout quand vous pose des questions. Quand vous interroge sur ce que vous faites.
Non. Parce que si on parle trop de ce qu'on fait, on le fait plus.
When she was 11 years old, her mother committed suicide, and she did not speak for a whole year. She sort of had this pattern of not speaking well into her 20s, and by the time she finally decides to start speaking, she says she doesn't think she has anything to say.
Marisol became known as the Sphinx without a riddle, and today she's as much a mystery as ever. In her 80s, she hasn't been interviewed in years. Her silence has always added to her glamorous allure. And for me, this can't be an accident. This is a Marisol interview from 1968.
You're such a marvelous observer of people. Would you like to say a few words on what is your background for this understanding of subject matter? I can't explain it. You can't explain it, not that way.
It is a disaster, this interview. It is painful to listen to this because she refuses to say anything at all. It must have been an act. It must have been part of her persona. We know that she was very media savvy. She appeared in all of these reviews and all of these profiles. She was controlling her image, and this was another way of controlling that image. And the person, I think, who learnt from this and took it to the next level, if you like, was Andy Warhol, because he must have seen the way Marisol behaved, and then he too imitated that flat, deadpan delivery to the point where, in his own words, he could come across like a machine. So this way of speaking, which I think Marisol arguably pioneered, is something that became a central mode of behaviour, if you like, for the most famous pop artist of them all.
So why did you decide to paint the electric chair?
I don't know. Andy Warhol picks Andy Warhol, that persona, from Marisol. That's Marisol's influence. Andy Warhol wasn't that person. He had to invent that, and that invention comes from Marisol.
Andy, do you think that pop art has sort of reached the point where it's becoming repetitious now?
Yes.
They were really very, very close friends. I think they were very similar personalities. Their silence, and then when they did talk, the things that they did say were expressed in a way to attract the most attention.
It's almost like she's a female version of him, in some senses.
I wouldn't argue with that.
She was important. She was part of the fabric of New York City. She was it. She was the it girl of pop art.
And like any it girl, Marisol made the news. One person says a Latin garbo. She appeared in the pages of Harper's Bazaar. She was in Vogue. There's this review, Brianna Doherty, this is New York Times, 1964, and it's a review of her exhibition, and it was a blockbuster. It was a total knockout. Apparently there were 2,000 or more people every single day visiting the gallery, which is just unprecedented. At this point, she was more famous than Andy Warhol. Marisol's work was a hit with the critics, but it was adored by the public.
I mean, there's this wonderful quote about the fact that everybody went, including mothers with 5 children. Her work was extremely accessible.
How does she compare to the greats of pop art, people like Lichtenstein or Warhol or Wesselmann?
Well, if you want my personal opinion, I actually like her better than Lichtenstein and Wesselmann. I mean, I think she can hold her own with Andy Warhol.
So what went wrong?
Her career heats up. She kind of has a little freak out. She goes to Italy and lives there for about 1.5 years.
How come?
She sort of felt like she was out of control. She was having trouble sort of hanging on to, figuring out who she was or what she was doing. And when she finally comes back, she suffers, as many other women artists do, of having been female. She still continued to make really strong, important work, and yet it's like she disappeared off the face of the earth.
She's not the only one. Go to a pop show today, and the great legacy of the female artists is barely visible. To me, it's an oversight we can no longer afford. The artists I've encountered depicted a newly consumerist, media-saturated world. The world in which we now live. They asked questions about gender, politics and capitalism that today seem more pertinent than ever. If I'm honest, at the outset I did worry a little bit that women pop artists may have been largely forgotten because their work wasn't actually any good. But meeting them has been a really powerful experience for me because I can now say with confidence that that simply wasn't the case. I think it's time we started paying these artists the attention they deserve, because once their work is back in the frame, the wider picture of pop art becomes that bit richer, that bit more complex, and ultimately much more exciting.
You've been gone too long. You've been gone